Sins of the Cinder Prophet, Book 1 of the Summerhost Saga, by Ian Garner. Chapter 1. The cool air of the early autumn afternoon kept the underground chamber cool, if not musty. Deep beneath the ruins of an abandoned settlement sat a sorcerer, clad in robes of black and scarlet, that draped above his head and obscured his features. Across from him sat a wizard, the wear and ruin of long years etched into his face. The two mages sat amidst the wizard's laboratory, separated by a feeble old table laden with scattered scrolls, potion bottles, ink bottles, and other paraphernalia.
"The dwarf must be alive when he reaches the mine," said the sorcerer. "The Ancient One was quite firm on this."
The wizard, known only to his associates as a Cinder Prophet, perused the stack of scrolls and parchment until he found the letter he had been searching for. A disgraced member of the Mages' Alliance of Neverfell, it was the prophet's duty to serve as advisor to the town master of Summerhost. It would be all too easy to lure the dwarf into Summerhost if the town master offered much gold in exchange for service. The wizard grabbed his staff and clapped it on the stone floor thrice. A door on the eastern wall opened, and a haggard man of perhaps 40 summers entered. His eyes were glazed, and he moved with an awkward gait, as if invisible strings maneuvered his knees and feet.
"Lord Tommen,"
the Cinder Prophet mused as he enclosed the letter in an envelope, pouring hot wax to the seal.
"If I might trouble you for your house seal, I must send word to Spirit Gulf."
Tommen removed the signet ring from his right hand, and the mage stamped it to the wax. The image of a lion atop a throne embedded the wax, and the prophet handed the letter to the town master. All the while, the sorcerer kept his face covered by the scarlet cloak.
"Excellent," the prophet said. "Now, see to it that this letter is delivered to Spirit Gulf post-haste. There's a cleric of Valdric in the city. You will find her in the smithing district. Ensure that she is the only one to open this letter. Send your lightest rider on your swiftest horse. Time is not our ally."
The enthralled town master let out a grunt and exited from the same door he had entered. Two guards clad in red, tattered robes entered as Tommen departed, moving to close and bar the door.
"Send Rotmaw in," the prophet barked.
The guard on the left nodded and rushed down the dark hallway.
"I assume you have a preferred location to keep the dwarf?" the prophet asked the hooded mage. "Have him brought to the mine. I have some agents skilled in coercion that have gone too long with dry blades."
The sorcerer took a dagger from somewhere in his sleeve and balanced the tip on the table, his index finger on the hilt. The dagger twirled idly. The Cinder Prophet noticed the handguard was finely crafted into the shape of a squid's tentacles, the bulbous head of the animal forming the hilt.
"Of course, I expect there to be stops along the way."
The two mages sat in silence a while, the only sound the scurrying of a rat as it ran across the floor of the laboratory.
"I trust you are ready to handle whatever guards the dwarf will bring with him?" the sorcerer asked. "Nothing that Rotmaw and his hounds can't handle," the prophet chuckled. "Besides, dwarves are greedy. If they aren't killed for foolishly rushing into a skirmish, I can always buy their loyalty for myself."
The sorcerer nodded.
"Very well. See that the trap is ready when the dwarf arrives at it."
The table rattled as a stone fell upon it from the open doorway. The Cinder Prophet startled in his seat. The sorcerer made no move. The prophet reached to the stone to inspect it, only there was no stone. It was the severed head of a red-cloaked guard. A heavy stench of soured ale, dried blood, and matted fur filled the laboratory as the massive goblin, King Rotmal, stood in the doorway. The remaining guard dangled from his left hand, desperately kicking and squirming, seeking precious air to fill his lungs.
You interrupted my supper,
the monster growled. The Cinder Prophet sighed and pointed his staff at the monster's hand, the one holding the struggling guard. A whispered word set the tip of his staff aglow with blue and white light. The temperature of the already cool laboratory dropped enough to put a thin layer of frost on the potion bottles, and a beam of ice zapped the goblin on the knuckle. Rotmal winced, more in shock than in pain, dropping the red-cloaked guard.
"That is enough,"
the prophet bellowed, absolute authority in his tone.
"There will be time enough to sate your gluttony. Until that time, take a band of your goblin clansmen and make for the Bay of Pendergad. You will find a ship waiting for you. Within a fortnight you will see a dwarf and his entourage sailing this way from Spirit Gulf. The loot is irrelevant to me, but the dwarf must be captured alive." Rotmal snarled as the guard began to crawl back through the doorway, none too eager to stay at his post. "The hell's with this?" the prophet heard the guard mutter. "And his entourage?"
Rotmal asked.
"May you and your kin dine well. But know this. Should the dwarf die in your possession, I will rend more than your pride when next we meet."
Rotmal growled, adjusted a circlet of jade and silver atop his head, and acquiesced. He may not be the smartest creature in the room, but goblins don't live as long as him without a few self-preservation skills.
"Very well, Cinder Prophet."
The prophet turned to the sorcerer.
"Am I to expect you at the mine, master?"
The mage sat silent for a moment, thinking.
"No, I will be on an assignment of my own. I must see it done."
"Very well," the prophet nodded. The sorcerer rose from his seat, darkness obscuring nearly every detail of his face, save for white tattoos of tentacles around his eyes.
"Do not fail me," the sorcerer warned. "The Ancient One has many eyes, and his reach is long. To fail me is to fail him. I need not remind you where you would be without his or my influence."
The shrouded mage vanished without another word. The Cinder Prophet stared at the empty space where his master had just stood, the agitation on his face evident. For nearly a century and a half he had worked to learn the secrets of a cosmos. He had begged, bartered, borrowed, stolen, and murdered his way to the upper echelons of the Mages' Alliance, and still he hungered for knowledge. When he was put on trial as a suspect for the untimely demise of the lore-keeper of the Alliance, it was the shrouded patron who intervened on his behalf. It was peculiar, really, how the jury all seemed to reconsider the death penalty in favor of probation and summer hosts so quickly. When the sorcerer approached him, offering him a seat at the proverbial table when the Ancient One rises, well, the prophet was only too eager to accept. It occurred to him in his agitation that the sorcerer had never given his name. Names are of power to a mage, the prophet knew, so it was no great shock that his master's lips were sealed. It unsettled him regardless, receiving threats of death, and perhaps worse than death, from a mysterious, unnamed benefactor.
"Fret not," he thought to himself. "Soon the Ancient One will rise, and I shall be free of the life debt."
Rotmal still stood in the open doorway, awaiting further orders. The Cinder Prophet had nearly forgotten him, then recalled the guard who ran away in fear.
"You are dismissed, Rotmal.
But one more thing. I do not suffer cowards to live. Dine well."